Okay, so we'll get started and welcome everyone to IBAC's Police Oversight Community webinar. I'd like to start this evening with the acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands we are all on as we meet today, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present, and acknowledge and pay respects to any elders who may be here today. So thank you for attending. We hope this will be the start of a longer conversation we have regarding IBAC's oversight role in police. My name is Peter Morris. I'm an Executive Director in the Operations Division at IBAC. I am the new kid on the block at IBAC, having joined in October last year. Prior to joining IBAC, I had a career in forensic practices in various professional services firms, and then prior to that, a career in the AFP, Australian Federal Police. I'll start this evening's webinar by taking a little time and talk to you about what IBAC is. I will then introduce Deputy Commissioner Kylie Kilgour, who will discuss IBAC's police oversight role, some of our recent work and the complaints process. Then we will have Investigations Team Leader Andrew Stillman, who will discuss IBAC's investigations that concern members of the Victoria Police, and then followed by Team Leader of Reviews, Craig Johnson, who will discuss IBAC's reviews of police internal investigations. And then finally, we will turn to answer as many questions as we can with the remaining time in there as well. We'll move to the next slide, Kirsty. So a recording will be and is being made as we speak at the moment, and that will be available on IBAC's website in coming weeks. And if you would like to turn on the live transcription, you can do so, and I'll give these instructions quite slowly, by clicking on the closed caption and then live transcript in the meeting controls. At the bottom of your desktop, you should then select show subtitle. So for computers, if you have a mobile phone, you can turn on captions in the Zoom app and then go to settings, tap meeting, and then turn on closed caption. So I'll just go through that again because that's quite technical. So you can turn on the live transcription by clicking on the closed caption and then live transcript. In the meeting controls at the bottom of your desktop, then select show subtitle. And again, if you're on a mobile phone, go to the settings, tap meeting, and turn on closed caption. And there will be an opportunity there for you to listen to that or watch the live transcription. So as I mentioned, there will be a Q&A session at the end of the session there, but you don't have to wait until the end of the session. So I would encourage you to use the chat function there to submit your questions. We've got a team in the background there who'll be collating all those questions and bringing together all the common ones. And we'll turn our mind to those at the end of the presentation. Also, just please be aware that we can only answer questions regarding our police oversight functions tonight, and we're not able to answer questions about ongoing investigations or any specific complaints. So hopefully you don't have any technical issues. We've done a fair bit of practice for this evening, so we hope we've minimised the technical risk that we have there. The only thing we can suggest that if you're having technical difficulties, it might be that you haven't got the latest version of Zoom. So we'd encourage you to, if you're having problems, to download Zoom. So great, we'll move over and talk on a little bit about IBAC. So IBAC is Victoria's Anti-Corruption Commission. Our vision is to build a corruption-resistant Victoria. Our purpose is to prevent and expose public sector corruption and police misconduct. And our functions are to investigate and expose serious corrupt conduct and police misconduct, and also to educate the public sector and community about the impacts of corruption and misconduct and build public sector capacity to prevent it from occurring. We're independent of government and are accountable to the people of Victoria through the Victorian Parliament. So the legislation that governs IBAC's work is the IBAC Act, and that requires us to do one of three things with any complaint or notification. And those three things are dismiss, refer, or investigate. And we'll touch on tonight how we go about making that decision. We can also conduct preliminary inquiries to help us determine whether to investigate a matter. Our Commissioner is Robert Redlich, AM QC, formerly of the Court of Appeals. He's an independent officer of the Parliament and is responsible for the strategic leadership of IBAC. Now, to let you know that IBAC has around 220 staff, and they come from a diverse range of backgrounds such as investigations, law, forensic accounting, information technology, education, administration, and a range of other backgrounds as well. Our jurisdiction extends across the whole of Victorian public sector, including members of Parliament, the judiciary, police, and state and local government. So that all adds up to around 300,000 Victorian public sector employees in around 3,500 organisations. So you can see we've got a small group of people and a large cohort over which we will work. So we'll now move on to have detective, there was a slip, wasn't it, Kylie? I've demoted you to Deputy Commissioner Kylie Kilgour. We'll talk a little bit more about IBAC.
Thanks very much, Peter, and good evening, everyone. It's very exciting to be part of this webinar tonight. I'm so glad so many of you were able to join us this evening, and I hope this is the beginning of a longer conversation that IBAC is really keen to have with the community to really promote our police oversight role, really encourage members of the community to come forward and bring complaints to us, because we're very keen to be improving always the work that IBAC does in this very, very important oversight function. So just to touch briefly on our police oversight role, we play a vital role in providing independent oversight of Victoria Police, and this includes by receiving and assessing complaints and notifications about corrupt conduct and police personnel conduct. We have a vital role in ensuring police officers have regard to the Charter of Human Rights. We conduct investigations about police personnel conduct or corrupt conduct, and there'll be more about this later. We also perform an important function reviewing the investigations of matters that we refer to Victoria Police to ensure those matters were handled appropriately and fairly. And there's going to be more about that function later in this seminar tonight too. We also monitor Victoria Police's compliance with a range of laws. So we ensure that they comply with laws such as laws that apply to sex offender registration, witness protection, DNA sampling, and firearm prohibition orders. And there's work underway at the moment to give us an additional oversight role with respect to the management of human sources. And you'll also see us publishing a lot of reports about our work. So those are available on our website, and we'll post up some details at the end of the webinar about where you can find more of that written material if you're interested in reading some of the important reports that we publish each year. I'm very pleased to say that we have 3 strategic focus areas for our work this year: excessive use of force against vulnerable community members, high-risk policing units, divisions and regions, and management by Victoria Police of family violence incidents involving their members. And we're very keen to hear from members of the community about any issues that you're experiencing, particularly in any of those strategic focus areas. Now, to give you a bit of a sense of the volume of complaints that IBAC receives each year about Victoria Police, in the last financial year, and we always count our complaints by financial year because we do annual reports to Parliament, we received 1,710 complaints and notifications, and that is a 27% increase compared to the last financial year. So you'll notice, if you have been tracking how our complaints function with respect to Victoria Police has been tracking over the last few years. Each year we receive more and more complaints, and just in the last 12 months we've received a 27% increase, which has been a massive increase. It's important to note that each complaint or notification may contain several allegations, and our assessment team spend some time breaking each complaint or notification down into the very specific allegations that are made in each of those complaints. And so, for example, in the last financial year, that 1,710 complaints turned into 2,726 allegations. 1,495 of those complaints came from members of the general public. So hopefully that's some of the people that are attending the seminar tonight. And we received 215 notifications directly from Victoria Police and other entities. Now I'm going to talk to you about how to make a report to IBAC. As I said, we're really keen to hear from members of the community who have complaints to make about Victoria Police officers. Anyone can make a report to IBAC. Generally speaking, we ask that complaints are lodged on our website in the first instance, and there's the link there to how you can do that on the website. But if for any reason making a written complaint is not for you, you can also call us on our 1300 number that's listed there, and there are officers available to talk to you about alternative ways of making your complaint. Now I'm just going to turn to a bit of a sense of what happens when you do make a complaint. And again, we really acknowledge that this can be a bit of a tricky process for people to understand. There's a lot of steps involved. There's a lot of complexity legally. There's a lot of time that is taken to very carefully assess and manage the complaints that we do receive. But when we receive your complaint, the first thing you can expect is that we'll let you know that we've received it. We might also contact you for more information to help us assess the allegations in the complaint and to inform our decision about what to do. It's really important if we do contact you for extra information that you respond to us in a timely way. And if you can't respond to us in the time frame that we give you, please get in touch and talk to us about why you might need a bit more time to get back to us. It can be very difficult for us to progress complaints if people don't engage in that very, very initial process of talking to us a bit more in a bit more detail about what your complaint is about. We have officers who assess each complaint to, like I said, to identify the specific allegations in the complaint, and that's based on the information you provide, relevant information that we can find through other sources that might be connected to your complaint. And we also at law have to assess whether your complaint is what's called a public interest disclosure, which is often also referred to as a whistleblowing type matter. The assessment process is not actually an investigation into your complaint. An assessment is IBAC's consideration of your information. We'll write to you by letter or email to let you know the outcome of that assessment process. And generally, we try to aim to do that within 45 days. Once a complaint is assessed, there are 5 possible outcomes, and those are detailed on the slide. So we may refer your complaint to Victoria Police for investigation. This may be because it doesn't involve police misconduct to such a threshold that IBAC can deal with it. Sometimes our referrals are also to other agencies who might be authorised to investigate, or we might consider that another agency is better placed to act on it. IBAC also selects certain cases for review to help ensure that those matters that we are referring to other agencies have been investigated fairly and thoroughly. And as Peter said at the start, Craig's going to talk to you a bit more about that review function in a minute. We can also conduct a thing that we call preliminary inquiries, which helps us to determine whether to refer, investigate, or not proceed with a complaint or notification. And Andrew's going to speak more about that in a minute. The reasons why we might investigate your complaint include consideration of IBAC's jurisdiction and what reasonable evidence there is of serious or systemic corruption or police misconduct. We also have the power to defer making a decision for up to 90 days if the complaint is being investigated by another appropriate agency. In some cases, we can't proceed with your complaint, and that may be because another agency's already addressed the complaint, the information provided isn't relevant to corrupt conduct or police misconduct, or the information provided is based on rumours or speculation. I'm now going to pass back to Peter, who's going to introduce you to Andrew Stillman, one of our team leaders in our investigations function.
Yes, and just if I can, I note a few people have put some questions in the Q&A. We are monitoring the Q&A and we have allowed plenty of time for questions at the back end, so don't stop in actually putting your questions in. We are collating, as I mentioned before, in the background there, and we'll address all of those questions and we get to the end of the presentation. So without further ado, and I don't want to take away from yourself, Andrew, so I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening, folks. My name is Andrew Stillman. I'm in my 5th year at IBAC as a team leader with the investigations unit of the operations division, although I'm currently involved in a capability development and training project. My experience is ex-law enforcement, I having spent 29 years with the Queensland Police Service, the majority of which I performed an investigative role. An IBAC investigations team leader leads a diverse team with a variety of skill sets. These teams are responsible for investigating highly complex and at most times sensitive allegations that fall within IBAC's police oversight jurisdiction. Our role manages all investigations to ensure they are carried out lawfully and they meet the requirements of our processes and procedures. We provide leadership and guidance to our teams to safeguard the delivery of quality investigations in an efficient manner. The Operations Division is made up of investigations, digital forensics, and collections and surveillance teams, which each support the functioning of our oversight role. At IBAC, we have 4 investigation teams. Each team is made up of varying ranks of investigators, forensic accountants, intelligence analysts, and investigation support officers. The members that make up our investigation teams come from all walks of life. You have ex-law enforcement, government and public sector investigators, interstate integrity agencies, Australian Defence Forces, and private agencies. And thus, each brings a range of diverse knowledge and experience to their positions. As Deputy Commissioner Kilgour mentioned earlier, the investigation unit conducts preliminary inquiries to determine if IBAC will investigate a complaint made against members of Victoria Police, or if IBAC will refer the matter back to the Victoria Police to investigate themselves. Investigations that are referred to Victoria Police are oversighted by IBAC throughout their life cycle, and at times, IBAC will assume responsibility for that investigation depending upon the seriousness and direction of the matter. We may also dismiss the allegation outright because it lacked substance or credibility. Other times, we may dismiss a complaint because it is about police providing poor customer service, and this does not meet our standard for misconduct or serious misconduct. The complaints and allegations IBAC receive can come from a variety of sources, including yourselves and the general public. By law, police employees are required to report their own misconduct. We call these reports mandatory notifications. Other times, we may run what we call an own motion investigation. Own motion investigations come about from information that IBAC discovers through our own research. A preliminary inquiry is typically when we receive or discover information that is in our jurisdiction but doesn't quite hit the level of suspecting police misconduct or corrupt conduct. For police, compared to the remainder of the public sector, we can look at a broader range of their conduct both on and off duty. In other words, IBAC can investigate police for matters we couldn't explore under IBAC's public sector jurisdiction. Once we conduct the preliminary inquiry, we determine if there is enough information or evidence to meet the threshold of suspecting police misconduct or corrupt conduct. Based on IBAC's strategic plan, we then make a recommendation to our executive of whether to dismiss, refer, or investigate. It is our executive at IBAC who will make that final determination. As mentioned before, IBAC is only a small agency, and unfortunately, as investigators, we cannot do everything. When we do investigate, we aren't just focused on the conduct alleged to have occurred. We have a greater responsibility. We look at the how and the why the conduct was able to occur. Very important. We look at policy and procedures, supervision, record keeping, culture, training, etc., so that when we finish our investigation, we are able to make recommendations relevant to the individuals involved and more broadly Victoria Police in order to prevent or minimise that conduct in the future. This can mean investigations can take more time to complete. Now, IBAC has a variety of powers like other law enforcement agencies, such as the collection of evidence, witness interviews, search warrants, criminal interviews, etc. But IBAC is unique in that it has the power of coercive examinations. And in the police space, we also have coercive disciplinary interviews. So unlike your right to remain silent in a criminal prosecution, in an examination or disciplinary interview, members of Victoria Police must answer the questions even if it incriminates them. Because this is such a significant power, the other side to the power is that the answers can't be used against them in a criminal prosecution. What this lets us do in some investigations is get to the heart of what happened and why. This power gives us the ability to expose more police misconduct or corrupt conduct as the priority for us to be able to prevent that conduct in the future. This is our dual function of exposing and preventing. Of course, that doesn't mean that if someone was coercively examined, we can't prosecute them. If we have obtained enough admissible evidence to meet the prosecution threshold, then prosecution can be considered as a means of exposing and preventing future conduct. Now, that's where we meet the public. We may need to speak to you because you are a witness. You could be a witness to the actual conduct, or a witness that assists in explaining how a process should work, or simply a witness who can explain what a document or an item is. Witnesses are crucial to IBAC's function. Witnesses can assist in a variety of ways, from providing information that is merely taken in notes to the preparation of a formal witness statement. Sometimes your information could be used simply to form part of our findings, or you could be required to give evidence as a witness on a criminal brief of evidence. In order to protect our investigations and the safety and welfare of people who can assist our investigations, we can also issue a confidentiality notice. This typically restricts a person from telling anyone about what they've said to IBAC or what IBAC has said to them. This power is not always used, and it must fit a criterion within our Act. Now, investigations will typically seek to either substantiate or not substantiate whether the conduct occurred. Depending on the type of incident being investigated, we may not be able to determine either way due to a lack of available evidence or corroborative information. It's important to remember that just because IBAC may dismiss a matter doesn't mean IBAC is saying it didn't happen. This can be like a not guilty verdict in a court of law. That result doesn't always mean something didn't occur. Like all investigations, it may simply mean that there is not enough available evidence to meet the level required to confirm it did. This can often be very confusing and disappointing to complainants and witnesses. We work very closely with many of IBAC's business units, including our legal, compliance, assessment and review divisions, and the prevention and communications division. This collective approach enables us to better meet IBAC's objectives to expose and prevent corruption and the police misconduct. We also work collaboratively with many of Victoria's integrity agencies, including the Victorian Ombudsman and the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. Additionally, our interstate counterparts, such as the Crime and Corruption Commissions of Queensland and Western Australia and the Independent Commission Against Corruption in New South Wales, form part of our network of investigative practice when investigating police corruption and misconduct. So, to help us explain preliminary inquiries, full investigations and reviews, we have created a scenario. So this is not based on any real-life events, but is a theoretical case. The scenario is that a 16-year-old male is making a complaint direct to IBAC. The young person claims that during his arrest, while handcuffed and face down on the ground, he was assaulted by both arresting officers. It is from this information that IBAC executive will consider if a preliminary inquiry or full investigation is warranted. So in the first instance, the complainant has provided insufficient information to make an informed decision if this meets our threshold of suspecting police misconduct or corrupt conduct. They've merely alleged they were assaulted during the arrest. However, moving on, you can see that the complainant has now identified that they were punched and suffered an injury as a result of the assault. The provision of the additional information may result in this matter initially being assigned for preliminary inquiry until such time we identify enough information to make a recommendation to investigate, refer, or dismiss. So let's look at a further progression of that scenario. In this last example, the complainant has provided the specific conduct of each member of Victoria Police and the identity of those members. This detail enables the IBAC executive to properly consider the commencement of a full investigation. I'll now hand you over to our reviews team leader, Craig Johnson, who will take you through the IBAC review process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.
Good evening all. My name's Craig Johnson and I'm the team leader of the IBAC reviews team within the assessment and review unit. Prior to leading this team last year, I was working in the investigations team with Andrew as a senior and principal investigator for approximately 2 years. And then prior to IBAC, I spent 10 years within the WA Police Force working in various locations around that state, including some remote communities. Majority of my law enforcement career was in an investigative role where I worked with various crime response teams and specialist squads. Enough about me. As previously outlined in this webinar, the review team plays an integral part in IBAC's police oversight function. In April 2021, IBAC created a dedicated reviews team to provide a centralised approach and specialise in reviewing cases that are of high strategic interest or involve serious allegations of police misconduct. The review team, similar to the IBAC investigation teams, consists of individuals with diverse background of skills and experience, which include investigations, assessments, surveillance, research and compliance. In 2021, the review team conducted a total of 143 reviews involving Victoria Police. The team not only conducts reviews of misconduct matters, but also conducts oversight investigations into serious and critical incidents. These might include, for example, injuries whilst in custody and non-fatal police shootings. And also, more significantly, deaths associated with police contact. When a matter is referred to Victoria Police for investigation, IBAC selects particular cases for review to ensure matters have been investigated impartially and thoroughly. An IBAC review is not a re-investigation of the matter, but involves oversight analysis to determine the adequacy of how that investigation was conducted. Majority of reviews are conducted retrospectively, which essentially means that we review the material at the completion of the Victoria Police internal investigation, after the judicial process, if criminal proceedings are commenced, or after a coronial inquest into a particular death. IBAC selects matters for review based on the consideration of certain factors, and I'll go through some of these with you now. The key strategic focus areas and or operational priorities for IBAC, for example, use of force against a person at risk, seriousness of the allegations and the level of position of the personnel involved, established patterns of behaviour or prior history of a subject member, whether the circumstances of the case are in the public interest, including where human rights issues arise, any indication of systemic or organisational issues, including workplace culture, vulnerability of the complainant or affected person, indications of bias during an investigation that may have affected the outcome, whether natural justice was afforded to the complainant or witnesses by providing the substance of any allegations or concerns and giving the person the opportunity to address these. And finally, was the investigation process and outcome proportionate to the issues involved, and did it appropriately consider the organisational issues or lessons learned as a result of the investigation? IBAC also considers the individual circumstances of a case to identify other issues that may warrant review. For example, it may be in the public interest to review a matter that has generated significant public concern. Like investigations, we work very closely with many other divisions of IBAC, and in particular our Prevention and Communication Division. Recommendations that are made to Victoria Police from inadequate investigation outcomes are consulted with multiple stakeholders to ensure that they appropriately address the areas of concern or improvement. Returning to this scenario that Andrew presented, this slide outlines what elements might call for a review of a police investigation. As noted in the slide, the young person from the earlier scenario claims that while they were handcuffed, they were punched by the arresting officer. However, no injuries resulted from this punch. These additional elements may lead to IBAC considering a referral of the complaint to Victoria Police, followed with an IBAC review. Thank you for your time this evening. I'll now hand you back to Peter Morris to facilitate the Q&A for this webinar.
Great, and thank you, Craig, Andrew, and Deputy Commissioner Kilgour. So we did ask in the invitation for some of the questions to be pre-submitted, and we do have a few of those. So I'll just turn to the other screen and we'll work through some of the questions that were done, and then we'll get into the questions tonight. As we mentioned, we do have plenty of time now, as you well see. So please feel free to keep typing the questions in and we will collate those in the background. So the first question that we had in here is, can you explain how IBAC remains independent when it is funded by the state government, who also fund Victoria Police? So Kylie, is that one for you?
I think it is. Thank you very much for that question. I guess what I would say is IBAC, we operate under a statute, as Peter said at the start of the presentation. That's the IBAC Act, which directs us as to our powers and functions. Commissioner Redlick is an independent statutory officer who reports directly to the Parliament about the functions and performance of IBAC. And also the deputy commissioners are also appointed as statutory appointments as well, to give us a sort of arm's length relationship with government. I note the point is made that, the funding does come from the same place, and that is true of all statutory bodies across the Victorian government. We're not the only ones in that situation. We are all funded by public money, i.e. taxpayer funding. But I don't really see that as being a conflict, that government is funding both us and Victoria Police.
Right, thanks, Kylie. Second question that was also pre-submitted in there is, does IBAC refer complaints made against individual police officers for misconduct back to the sergeant in charge of the same police station? First question. And if so, how does the investigation remain independent? So either Kylie or Craig.
Yeah, I'll take that, because it seems to be a common misconception that's going around that IBAC refers matters back to local police stations for investigation. That certainly is not the case. So when we make a referral back to Victoria Police for an internal investigation to be undertaken, the referral really goes back to their Professional Standards Command, which is their specialist part of Victoria Police, who are responsible for oversighting any misconduct and the general sort of ethical and professional standards for the Victoria Police Force. And we see this in the public sector as well. A lot of public sector agencies also have similar units who are responsible for taking referrals from us and working out how best they should be investigated. Now, absolutely, in times gone by, there have been issues around Victoria Police when they receive those internal investigations from us, allocating them out to regions to be investigated in situations that we've not been happy with. For example, that this question poses about a sergeant who's asked to investigate basically his own staff. We don't expect that to be the way that Victoria Police handles matters that we refer to them. We have in fact been doing quite a lot of work with Victoria Police over the past few years around their management of conflicts of interest, and have absolutely pointed out to them that referring matters straight back out to the regions or the local stations where the matters have arisen generates a lot of community disquiet, and it's absolutely a conflict of interest in most circumstances for that to occur. There are some matters, however, that I am aware they do get dealt with by Victoria Police through what they call a local management resolution process, and that is more to do with customer service type complaints. But absolutely, the misconduct complaints that we refer back to Victoria Police, we absolutely have high expectations around conflicts of interest being managed appropriately. And if that means geographic separation of who should be investigating who, absolutely that is one of the measures that Victoria Police can utilise. And I would also say that the most serious misconduct matters that we refer back to Victoria Police, Professional Standards Command tends to take the running of those. So there's absolutely a separation between what's happened in the local station and who's investigating those matters.
Right, thanks, Kylie. Craig, did you want to add any more there? I know we've spoken about the review function in there, but it might be worthwhile just touching on that again to re-emphasise that point.
Yeah, I think just adding on to what Kylie mentioned, when it is serious allegations, we will always see those matters marked for review as well, and they are prioritised within our within my team. Look, the other thing I would add is We do also, part of our review process, look at the classification of matters when they are referred to Victoria Police to ensure that they are getting the correct classification, and it's part of our review process to ensure that it's being allocated to the appropriate investigator. And as Kylie outlined, the conflict of interest is a very big part of that. As you can imagine, in a police force that's quite big, you will have a lot of members that would have worked with different people at different times, and they're all considerations when PSC, more in particular, look at when they allocate matters and when we review them. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Craig. We'll throw a couple of others in there that we're seeing in there as well. So, question here, can anyone make a complaint on behalf of someone else?
Yes, I'll take that. So yes, that is possible. You can make a complaint on behalf of someone else. There's just a few steps that you have to go through when you do that. So we do ask you to demonstrate that you have what's called an authority to act on behalf of that person. So we can do that by you filling out, there's a form basically on our website. So when you log in to make the complaint, if you are doing it on behalf of someone else, you just need to fill out a bit of extra paperwork that demonstrates that that person knows that you are lodging that complaint on behalf of that person. We do sometimes receive complaints from members of the public who just want to sort of comment generally about something that they've heard about in the social media or seen on the news. We can't generally do much with those complaints. We really need individuals to come forward with the specific complaints for us to investigate.
Great, thanks, Kylie. Another question that was put through is, how does IBAC define serious misconduct when the legislation does not provide a clear definition of what this entails, and how does it differ from misconduct, i.e. what is serious?
That is a very good question, and yes, absolutely, the fact that there isn't a definition in our Act, it is difficult, and so I can't say serious misconduct means blah, 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 because I don't have an Act that I can quote from. I am aware that there are recommendations that were made by the parliamentary inquiry a few years ago about us effectively adopting a serious misconduct definition that comes from the New South Wales equivalent legislation, and IBAC's very supportive of a model like that. We would really like a definition in our Act of serious misconduct so that it is clearer for everybody what the demarcations are. I guess what I would say, without a legal definition, the kinds of things that we think about are, absolutely, if there's like a serious assault that has occurred, if it's, stuff to do with, associations with criminals, drug-related offending, anything that's kind of heading up towards the criminal end of the scale of police misconduct. But equally, things like, I'm just trying to think about a few matters that we've investigated recently that I can talk about, but things like those poor responses to family violence incidences that involve police members, we absolutely take those sort of matters very seriously. The predatory behaviour as well that some people may be aware of, that also has been subject to review by the Victorian Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission a few years ago. We're absolutely keeping a very close eye on that, and we work very closely with the police unit that are investigating a lot of those matters. So I absolutely take on board, the legislative gap that we have, and like I said before, we'd be very happy to see a legislative refinement. And I think probably some people that are participating tonight are aware that there is, and if you're not, I'll push this out there, there is a government review of the police oversight model in Victoria underway by the Victorian government. And you can jump on, I think it's on the Victoria Government's Engage website. There's a bunch of consultation papers that are available. I'd really encourage people to make your contributions to that consultation process, because there is a piece of work that is being done by the government to consider how we can improve our police oversight system. And I think that's a really important piece of work that's going on in government at the moment, and IBAC's absolutely supportive of that process that's underway.
Right, thanks, Kylie. We had another question coming through that IBAC can refer, investigate or dismiss a complaint. how many are referred and how many are dismissed. So I think it's a good one, Kylie. I know you spoke about that one earlier, but as you said, there's a lot of common misconception around the numbers here. So if you wouldn't mind, can you just back up a little bit and provide a bit more information around those figures?
Yes. So I think we talked about there were about 1,700 complaints that came through the door in the last financial year. Just over 50% of those do get dismissed, and that's because they're not really about police misconduct or serious misconduct per se. They're often more of a complaint about what I would describe as more customer service type issues. There's about 50% that just kind of go away because they don't hit our misconduct threshold. So then if you think about the remainder, and as Andrew Stillman mentioned in his part of the presentation, we are a small agency, and so we have to be strategic about how many investigations we can take on at any one time. And so we do tend to focus on the more serious / systemic corruption issues that we observe in Victoria Police. And Victoria Police, they have a professional standards command of over 200 FTE, as well as they have a workforce of many thousands of police officers who are available to do internal investigations where it's appropriate. And so we do refer quite a lot of matters back to Victoria Police for their internal investigation. And it's one of the issues I think that the community debates often about the police oversight model as it is designed in Victoria currently, is that is the way that the model is designed. So at any one time, IBAC's got maybe 10 or 15 investigations underway. Many of those investigations can take us a couple of years. So you'll probably see in our annual report last year, for example, we only finished about 5 investigations, but there's always more sort of underway that we're not necessarily talking about at that point in time. And increasingly, we do rely on the review function. So as Craig said, we got extra investment in the last state government budget to really amp up the review function that Craig leads. And so we have, I think in our last annual report, we reported some sort of close to 70 reviews. As Craig mentioned tonight, his team have already cracked through well over 100 reviews so far, and we're projected to do quite a lot more. And I might get Craig now to talk a bit more about that review function and how we're relying on that to really help us do some of the heavy lifting that we can't manage with the current resourcing that we have for investigations.
Yeah, thanks, Kylie. And look, I think the review team is part, and I think I mentioned this in my presentation, of the assessment and review unit. And prior, a lot of the way we approached the review function was in conjunction with assessments. I think by dedicating the team and putting in the resourcing with people like myself, I guess with an investigative background, it's obviously improved our relationship with Victoria Police as well, to make sure we're actively reviewing matters that we do refer, and also giving us that flexibility that we can ask for further information and do a comprehensive review, I guess, and provide really good outcomes, whether that's areas of improvement or recommendations that come out of it in terms of potential policy gaps. So I see the review function really feeding into our sort of, prevention type work as well, and also helping Victoria Police identify potentially deficiencies that they obviously don't have the opportunity to look at. So, yeah, really going well. And, thanks, Kylie. We're looking at a bit more of a bumper sort of next 6 months. So a very busy period at the moment.
Right. Thanks, Greg. Moving along now, this one, I suspect this question came in about the time we were talking about independence. So the question that came through was, doesn't the state government also appoint IBAC personnel?
We are appointed by the Governor in Council. So we're actually, the appointment of the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioners is by the Governor of Victoria. So yes, she is a part of the government, but she's also quite separate in that she's the Queen's representative in Victoria. There is then an employment process like the rest of the public sector for other staff who are employed, but that is really headed up by our CEO of IBAC, Marlo Baragwanath is the CEO, and she's a public sector body head in her own right under the Public Administration Act. And all IBAC officers are then employed under the IBAC Act and report to Marlo. so that they are they're not sort of public servant appointments, I guess, in terms of we're not departmental public servants, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Kylie. Another question coming in here, and Andrew, we notice there's been a few that haven't gone your way, so I might get you to comment and then invite the others in to jump in as well. It's saying, do you think we have a clear understanding of the extent of corruption problem in the Victorian public sector and VicPol? So I'm going to throw that, I'll start with Andrew and then we'll throw around the panel.
Yeah, it's hard to always have a clear picture of corruption because it ebbs and flows. As we spoke about earlier, as we address a theme and we put our prevention methods in place and reporting back to Victoria Police as the entity, and they fix that hole, that does not prevent corruption occurring in other areas. So, for instance, we may focus on the use of force and we may see a decrease in our complaints in that area over the next 6 months to a year. But at the same time, we may then send an increase in domestic violence reports involving police members. So that then becomes one of our strategic focuses, as Kylie mentioned earlier. So do we have a clear picture? I think we certainly do have pictures as we move forward, especially from an investigator's point of view. Is it always clear? No, not all the time. But as I said, we continue to focus on what our research shows us and what our investigations and our complaints show us. And at most times, we're hitting the mark as we go through. So I'm not sure if you agree with that, Kylie.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think it's also interesting, as Andrew said, we do compare notes with our interstate counterparts. And so absolutely, we can see that there are enduring risks across all police forces in Australia and internationally. And we absolutely, pay attention to that, what that international and national research is saying to help inform our own insights about what's going on in Victoria. There's absolutely some enduring risks around things like illicit drug use by police officers that still continues, even though, IBAC did some work on that when it was first established. It still pops up as an issue. There's corruption issues around, organised crime, and they are on a mission to infiltrate both the public sector and Victoria Police. And I don't think organised crime is ever going to go away in any of our lifetimes. So it's something that we have to continually be vigilant about. We do investigate quite a lot of matters that involve criminal associations between people in the public sector and also in Victoria Police. So you'll see us continuing to be vigilant about that. It is fascinating, actually, the corruption that does go on, the things that I've been at IBAC now for a year, and things that I thought surely people don't do that anymore, but they're still doing it. So I think, as I always say to people, IBAC's not going to go out of business anytime soon. It's an unfortunate fact of working life that unfortunately some people want to break the rules, and it's really important that bodies like IBAC are available to help tackle that when it does happen.
Thanks, Kylie. And I'm going to invite you in also, Craig, on that one, given you see a lot of the complaints and notifications that come through.
Yeah, I think Andrew and Kylie have covered the most part of that. Look, the only thing I would say, obviously we're presenting to the public here this evening, but we do invest a lot of time in our education piece with police as well. So make sure we encourage police officers to report police misconduct. And I think that really is a really strong piece of work to make sure that we are identifying any risks or things that are happening. So we do a lot of work with, the police academy and various ranks to ensure that they are managing complaints internally correctly. And look, from starting at the police academy, they're aware of how they can make a complaint, being a junior member and witnessing certain things of serious misconduct and how they can go about that. So, yeah, I think we always hope we like to be across a lot of it, but as Kylie has said, there's always different aspects of situation that come up that it does still surprise me after seeing it for quite a while. So, but yeah, it's an ongoing bit of work, I guess.
Thanks, Craig. Another question that's come in, and this is probably fairly broad, but it'll probably invite everyone in there, is what do I do if I make a complaint to IBAC and I don't agree with IBAC's decision. So there's a couple of decisions we can probably cover off on here from that aspect. So where shall we start? We go back to you, Craig, on the initial decision, perhaps?
Yeah, we can do. I think Kylie's probably best placed to answer this one because they all go through to her. But yeah, if they don't agree with the decision, we obviously have the Victorian Inspectorate that oversight IBAC. So we are very transparent to provide their details to the complainant if it is a particular issue around the way their complaint was handled or any particular issues. We encourage people and provide that transparently. Yeah, I probably would say Kylie would see more of the decisions that come through to her. So I might flick over to her if that's okay.
Absolutely. So yes, under the IBAC Act, the delegation really sits with the Deputy Commissioner. So there's 3 Deputy Commissioners at IBAC. There's myself, Stephen Farrow and David Wolfe, and it's our job basically with every complaint that comes in the door to make the final decision according to the IBAC Act about whether we're going to dismiss, refer or investigate. And it's a tough decision to make. So there's a lot of factors that go into making those decisions. They are all assessed very, very carefully. Like I said, sometimes we dismiss matters because people don't engage with us. They don't give us enough information for us to be able to justify making a decision to refer or investigate. So if the reason why you disagree with our decision is because I've dismissed it or one of the other deputies has dismissed it, and it's because you haven't given us enough information, there is an opportunity for you to engage with us further and provide us with further information. We can always reopen a complaint if you want to provide us with further information if you've got that. If you don't like our decision to refer a matter to, say, to Victoria Police, again, we can have a conversation about the reasons why we have made that decision. Like I said, often our decisions are bound by both legislative requirements around if we, so legislatively, we are actually required to make a judgment about if the other agency is better placed to investigate a matter. So if I make a judgment that Victoria Police are actually better equipped to investigate a matter, I'm legislatively obliged to make that referral, if that makes sense.
Just a slightly different angle, Kylie, if you don't mind. I'm just jumping in, just in case our participant here is talking, don't like our decision, perhaps on the result of an investigation might be another angle that's coming from, because Andrew spoke about that one as well.
Yes, so I might get Andrew to help me with this as well. But yes, if the decision is actually, we have investigated it, we've concluded the investigation and we haven't been able to substantiate your allegations, Andrew, you might want to comment further on what other options there are for people.
Yeah, Kylie, with an investigation, it really comes down to the amount of available evidence that is before us or corroborative evidence that is before us, and that's from what we make our decisions from. So whilst a person may have made a complaint, if there's nothing to back that up or to support that to the standard that we're looking at, then unfortunately a lot of times that will result in outcomes that may not be suitable to the complainant themselves. So we always ask that when you are making a complaint that you provide as much detail as possible. And that can include as many people that you could call witnesses. I spoke about witnesses earlier and how vital they are to IBAC's work. Okay. Prosecution is not always our focus. Okay. It is one means which we can expose and prevent corruption, but it's not always our focus. Right. We want to dig down and find the reasons deep as to why the corruption occurred. Okay. So we need everybody who is involved in the particular case to assist us to be able to find that, because without that, we're hitting our heads up against a wall as well. And whilst we may think something may have occurred, once again, it could be the situation that we just can't show it. We just can't show it to the standard that we're able to report on it properly. So a lot of times there will be cases that will fall over for those reasons. But that doesn't also mean that in the future, if similar conduct involving the similar parties is identified, IBAC has the ability to, as we spoke about before, conduct own motion investigations, which then may reinvigorate your original complaint. which, whilst being historical, may then add substance and background to other additional conduct that we've observed.
Right, thanks, Andrew. A couple more, and I think we can keep going a bit longer there. Here's a great one here, Kylie. Is the agency planning further expansion investment in the investigations capability and staffing this year?
This year? Look, I think probably anyone who's been watching Commissioner Redlick's public commentary around resourcing for IBAC, you probably have heard him in the news over the last few years about our resourcing levels. Absolutely, we are advocating constantly to government about the need for additional resourcing for our investigation function, but also more broadly across all of the functions that we perform in IBAC. Like I said, we've had a 27% increase just in Victoria Police complaints in the last 12 months, and real human beings have to process each of those complaints. So if you think, that's just the complaints area, and then how that flows through the rest of the agency, we could do with a good lick of extra investment. At the same time, we're conscious, COVID has knocked the state budget around pretty hard. So we also have to be realistic about where government's going to have to put its money, particularly, dealing with the pandemic. So if you want to advocate for us getting more money, absolutely be our guest. We'd love you to come on board and help us to get more resources.
Indeed. And I'll just make a comment. It's not just about the investigations team as well. We need it across the whole unit because we work as one, even though it might seem that the investigations piece, an increase there will mean more investigations being done, but it doesn't help if we don't get funding for other parts of IBAC as well. So
yes, for example, our investigations, we have a team of lawyers in IBAC who also help every investigation to be successful. So it's not just the investigators. We also need to, amp up the number of lawyers that do all that important sort of legal work in prepping matters as well.
Okay, next question coming through. Once IBAC receive a complaint, how long does it take to refer it out?
That can depend upon a few things, but generally speaking, we try to manage matters within that 45-day timeframe that I spoke about at the start, about us trying to process most of our assessment work within 45 days. There are some matters that can take longer because they can be complicated. And I have to also say one of the downsides of COVID for IBAC was that we built up a bit of a backlog because it took us a little while to adjust some of our working patterns to the working from home arrangements. So we have been suffering a bit of a backlog over the last couple of years. So you might find that some matters we can't get to as quick as that 45 days, but we do work very hard on trying to meet that 45-day time frame.
Okay, great. And I'll just stretch in. I know we're on 8 o'clock, but I might just combine two questions here. They're inextricably linked. Are Victoria Police required to implement recommendations made by IBAC, and how long does Victoria Police have to implement those recommendations?
Yep, so I think I should take this one as well. So yes, we can make recommendations under one of the section or a few sections of our Act, but particularly there's a section 159, which we use to make recommendations to Victoria Police arising particularly from our investigations, but also in some of our review work. The Chief Commissioner of Police doesn't have to take on board our recommendations. He is allowed to write back to us and say, thank you very much for that, but I disagree. But what I would say is that in the majority of circumstances, because the evidence base for our investigations work is so thorough and so strong, and the effort that people put into crafting those recommendations between the investigators and our lawyers and our prevention and policy and research people, we don't generally get that response. So generally the Chief Commissioner will accept our recommendations and undertake to implement them. We try as IBAC to give them timeframes that we think are reasonable and then try to hold Victoria Police to those timeframes. It can be an ongoing challenge though, because there are a lot of recommendations that we have made to IBAC over the last few years. So there's a body of work that we're constantly chasing Victoria Police about, and absolutely it's an area where I would like to see them improve, and they know that because I've had conversations with them about their need to be more timely in their responses to IBAC's recommendations.
Right. Thanks, Kylie.
And so in terms of the question about how long it takes, so like I said, how long it takes, so some recommendations we could say, we think this will take you 3 months to do, so do it fast. There are other recommendations that we make where we're asking for them to, completely. So, for example, we asked them to completely overhaul the way that they do drug testing in Victoria Police. And we said, you're going to need 12 months to do that work. So could you please do it within 12 months? So it can depend upon the nature of the recommendation that we're giving, is basically what I'm saying about how long we give them. But then we do monitor, and if they're not implementing in the timeframe that we've asked, then we're back on their case to say what's going on with that.
Great, thanks, Kylie. Look, I apologise. We've even gone over time a little bit here, and there are more questions here that we just haven't been able to get to. And I will invite you to get in contact with IBAC to discuss some of those questions after that. Again, this webinar has been recorded and will be available for replay on the website in there. And just a reminder that there may have been some questions that are posed that touched on individual cases, and as mentioned at the very beginning, that we're not able to answer questions on specific cases. So if again, I can just say thank you for attending the webinar tonight. It's been great. Thanks again to our presenters. A special thanks to all the people that have been working in the background there, pulling all the technology off. We didn't have a failing in there, so thanks team on doing that one. Keep an eye on, as we have on the slide there, for our website for updates in there, and you can see us through the e-newsletter, IBAC Insights. You can subscribe to that, and you can follow us on all the various social media as well. So thanks everyone, and we wish you a good evening.